Trevor, good afternoon to you.
Hi, Ian.
Nice to have you with us as ever. Let's start off with the Bibby Stockholm then, because this, of course, is, it was it was seen as symbolic. I didn't think it did what the last government thought it was going to do, and that was sort of I sensed, Trevor, to create the illusion that there is a floating barge. It's not on land, so therefore it's symbolic of a government being tough, even though it was sort of connected to land and you could walk off it and on it whenever you felt like it. But nonetheless, the Labour government have decided enough is enough, and come January, it's going.
Yes, I mean, it was actually a floating hotel, not just a barge or anything else. It was quite comfortable. I think it was used to house workers who were well paid in good jobs working in the shipping industry. Yes, it's an investment that has gone down the plug hole thanks to the new Labour government, which has decided basically that it's going to give up on controlling migration. It's declaring an effective amnesty by giving an all clear to something like 70 to 100,000 those who are already here, which is basically like putting a huge sign up on the White Cliffs of Dover saying, welcome all.
Indeed, yes. I mean, there's no other way to articulate it really than the absolute fine way you just did, Trevor. This, of course, I sense though for Labour. I don't know whether this was more expensive or there were other reasons. It was quite symbolic of the last government. That's where I think they've come in on this, and the new Home Secretary Yvette Cooper has probably thought, we don't. It's tainted by the Tories. We're the new kids are in town, so we don't want any lousy initiatives that came from the Blues.
Well, it is certainly symbolic of Tory cock-ups and timidity and inability to drive through an agenda which was long overdue. So not much credit there, to be absolutely honest. But where is the credit in getting rid of a system which at least helps to deal with those who do arrive illegally and do need to be processed and shouldn't be simply given free admission on the day they set foot illegally on British shores? So what are the Labour government going to do? Well, pretty well nothing, as I say. I think Welcome to the World is going to be the agenda for the future, and once they've given those who are already here asylum in this country, whether they deserve it or not, because they certainly won't be able to check all the credentials or otherwise of these people, some of whom are extremely dubious people, I have to say. A reasonable percentage will not have the best interests of this country at heart. And then on top of that, in order to facilitate, in inverted commas, some sort of deal with France and the rest of Europe, we will agree to take, excuse me, at least 100,000 a year on a regular annual basis from the European Union.
And that, to me, seems more crackers than anything we'd seen before, which we thought was, pretty bonkers anyway. So it does lead me to believe that both governments have lost their minds when it comes to sorting this problem out. And I do begin to wonder, Trevor, whether they are really that bothered about it. And I don't want to put my tinfoil hat on again here, but it does feel a little bit like that.
Well, I think if the Tories now in opposition have any ambition ever to return to government, they will have to get serious about the question of immigration, because that's the biggest story in town. That, along with the green issues, which you've been addressing just now, which I think will come back and blow up in this government's face as the public discovers that it's spending those 28 billion that the Labour Party pretended that it wasn't going to spend after all every single year on green issues. I mean, I think Ed Miliband has basically managed to con us all by telling us that, no, it's only going to be 5 billion a year, but it's not. It's going to be a lot more, and it's going to be very expensive to all of us. All of these things are issues which are going to be like treading on a rake for this government once the tax-paying public begins to wake up to the fact that they've been conned on this election.
Well, let's move to the Tory party then, Trevor. Plans to name a new leader in November, Robert Jenrick, former immigration minister, of course, who went from being, I remember somebody telling me he was nicknamed the librarian because he was so quiet over there at Tory HQ for a while, and then sort of became this rather verbal and vocal opponent to anything that Rishi Sunak did, particularly on the issue of immigration, etc. Very much Team Braverman in that respect. He's emerged as a leadership front runner in a new poll. We've got Mel Stride there, Suella Braverman, Priti Patel, James Cleverly, Tom Tugendhat and Kemi Badenoch. They appear to be the names. There might be one or two get thrown into the hat. What are you making of it, Trev?
Well, I'm not sure that waiting until November the 2nd, which means after the party conference, is a good idea.
Yeah.
OK, don't rush it, because they haven't really got an absolutely clear, bold front runner at the moment. They haven't got a Boris Johnson. They haven't got a Nigel Farage in the race. And Robert Jenrick, who's a very nice man and says the right things, simply does not have the charisma and presence to dominate the agenda. And you need someone who's going to actually stand up there and attract attention of the thinking public as they begin to wonder why on earth they voted Labour. And so I just wonder which of those that you've named so far is actually going to do that. And even the party itself has no idea. So what we are to make of all of that, I simply do not.
And do they, obviously the debate they appear to be having is do they go more to the right, do they go more to the left? They could try and encroach on reform's lawn, but I suppose that, you know, people will see reform as the real deal if that is your flavour of politics. And the Conservatives will just be sort of this sort of pale imitation catch-up merchants that don't really mean what they're saying. And of course, if they go to the left, they just become sort of Labour light, as it were. So they're a bit scuppered in many ways. Someone's got to really think about this.
They don't need to be scuppered, but I think you're probably right. They've scuppered themselves. Yeah. And where is the centre point in all of this? Which is right, which is left? I think that the people who would say that the centre point is where they stand, the Tom Tugendhats of this world, are actually people who are Remainers. This is the dividing line, really, essentially, within the Conservative Party. Those who backed Remain and those who backed Brexit. And the general public has been bamboozled by claims that Brexit's been a total failure, when indeed it has not. And it certainly could have been much more of a pronounced success had the Tories, especially under Boris Johnson, who, after all, led us into this, had he actually shown how well we could benefit from Brexit, and I don't think the Tories would have been in the plight they are now, which means automatically that they need to move back towards where they were in 2016, at least on the issue of controlling our borders and making the best of Brexit. If they go anywhere near the sort of Starmer line of basically backing their way into the European Union one way or another, I think they're doomed. I think Nigel Farage is already effectively the leader of the opposition. And in the end, the Tories are going to have to accommodate him, either as an ally or by following some of the leads that he's already given.
Yeah. Do you sense that, I think Farage tweeted, I think it was today, that there will be more Tories join Reform, they'll cross the floor. Do you see that coming?
I think that is almost inevitable. And although Suella Braverman has said categorically that she has no intention, I think that's politics, and we will see. But I mean, look, I think that the Tories are simply going to flounder now until they get a leader, and maybe even when they've got a leader. In the meantime, as Nigel Farage has demonstrated time and time again, as he did when he was a member of the European Parliament, with his a remarkable speech about the wet dish rag von Rompuy, which has been watched by hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people. He has the ability to grab the public attention in a way that resonates with the public. So, you know, he is going to be a formidable figure, even though he's a leader of only 5 MPs in the House of Commons.
Well, it's going to be interesting how that one pans out, but November will be the time we get to know a little more. Meanwhile, that's also the month, of course, when America crown their new president. It looked like a bit of a walk in the park for a bit for Donald Trump. Kamala Harris, and I can scarcely believe I'm saying this, Trevor, but it seems that she has narrowed the polls, whether people like her or not.
Well, aren't we blessed, Ian? I mean, here you are with the Democratic woke party desperately looking for the right sort of candidate, the right sort of gender, the right sort of colour or tint. And luckily, you know, by the grace of God, we've got Kamala Harris, who is half Indian, half Caribbean, or African American, I'm not quite sure which. But as long as she has the tint of colour, and as long as she's a woman, she straddles both targets. She's the right gender and she's the right colour. I think this is a fantastic thing for Western civilization.
That's the way. Maybe that's the way we need to do it. Perhaps, I mean, if the Tories do that, then they've got a whole choice of women of colour that they can pick from. In fact, the three front runners are all women of colour. So maybe, you know, it's a done deal for one of them.
Well, I think Kemi Badenoch is probably the most formidable figure in that group of runners and riders, because I always think that people who are engineers seem to be able to solve problems.
Yeah.
And she is pretty frank and robust on the issues which we've been talking about, particularly on the identity politics of this world. As a black woman, she is particularly well placed to discuss that issue. As a woman, she's also well placed to discuss the sort of things that exercise many of us, including J.K. Rowling. So, you know, I think that it's for her to lose this leadership contest. The rest of them seem a bit sort of pale, male and stale.
Yeah. We will, well, it's exciting. But so within 1 month, of course, for those of us that, you know, love all this stuff, we've got the election of a new Tory leader and the election of a new president of the United States. Just on that last point there, what are you sensing, Trevor? Kamala or Donald? Which one of those two is going to be the next president?
Well, talking about it's theirs to lose, Donald Trump surely must, after all the events of the last few days and weeks, the attempt to assassinate him, the brilliant pictures that showed that he was a fighting spirit, the fact that Kamala Harris is unable to string two words together without bursting out laughing at her own void of speech. I mean, she is the idea, the very concept of word salad could have been invented for Kamala Harris.
Yeah.
And the idea that a person who is opposed by the man she actually sought to support, in other words, Joe Biden, he didn't want her as his successor, nor does Barack Obama, nor do half the people in the Democratic Party. They're just stuck because she's a woman with a black heritage. And honestly, I don't think if Trump is worth his salt, he'll romp home on this one again.
Indeed. We can't wait. Full coverage, of course, when it happens. Trevor, thank you, Trevor Kavanagh, former political columnist and former political editor over there at The Sun.